Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us is Dr. Ariel Cohen, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's back with us to discuss developments from the war in Ukraine and if a path to peace is nearing and just how effective are the sanctions that we have in place. Ariel, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
It's a pleasure, Jill. Unfortunately, in the last 24 hours, I saw some worrisome developments, including the report that China may be supplying Russia with ammo, missile systems, among other things. And the good news is that Russia is running out of some ammo that they need to ask China for help. I cannot imagine China sending troops. The US National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, met with his Chinese counterpart in Rome yesterday and told them in no uncertain terms that if China is going to supply war materiel to Russia, as Aunt Lydia says in Handmaid's Tale, there will be consequences. Russia is not bowing. Putin is not bowing out. That means that the sanctions, while they're working in the sense of wreaking havoc in the Russian economy, we'll talk about it some more, it is really unprecedented what's going on with the Russian economy, and also some of the counter measures or effects of the Russian economy going down, negative effects against the Western economy. However, Putin did not change his tack. People in his entourage, I'm told by Russian sources, are telling each other stories they don't want to recognize. They just don't want to face the reality that their war in Ukraine is a failure in terms of planning, intelligence, preparation, leadership, and execution. So besides the emotional and humanitarian aspects of thousands of Ukrainians being killed, including children, millions of Ukrainians, we're hitting 3 million mark in the country of 44 million people, with a lot of people already out of the country. So we're getting close to 10% of the population being outside. This is faster and higher numbers than Syria, than Afghanistan. This is a big disaster. And the Europeans were very good about taking Ukrainians, but even Europe is not, made out of rubber. Right. So beyond that, the Russians did not come to that point that they recognize for their own sake, for their own regime survival, they need to stop that war. We're not there yet.
Right, and it does appear that it's going to take some more time. I mean, Ariel, we've seen the reports that they're just openly picking off journalists, and it's hard as a conflict journalist because it's a risk that you take, but just to be in that kind of environment where you're trying to report the truth makes it incredibly challenging. But how do you think Putin is thinking here? Is he just going with the mindset that he has nothing to lose, and obviously you can't speak against the regime? I would imagine many of his generals and those within his inner circle, even if they thought counter to him, are never going to make those remarks. He's in this bubble where there's no one to contradict him or ask if the strategy is working.
I monitor some of the top Putin's propagandists, and the chain of command works. Putin, his director of public information, call it whatever you want, the guy in charge of the media named Alexei Gromov. I met the guy. And he and his staff generate talking points to these propagandists day in and day out, sometimes several times a day. Sometimes they call in to the show anchors and tell them what to say. So yesterday I was watching one of these anchors sort of pounding the table saying, you realize Ukraine is just a stopover on the way to Europe. We will attack Poland. And I heard from my other sources, not in Russia, that the Russians were threatening to hit Poland with a nuclear weapon if Poland gives those MiG-29 fighters to Ukraine. So there's signs of Russian thinking about escalation in the Russian military doctrine that I studied. They talk about escalate to de-escalate, meaning to impose their terms, they would escalate to nuclear and force the negotiations. That's extremely damaging and dangerous. But let's talk a little bit about the economic impact. So ruble, we know, collapsed, what, 40%? The black market appeared in currency that didn't exist since the Soviet times. So let's say ruble is 150 rubles a dollar now. It almost 120 or 30. Anyway, the black market rate is up to 203 rubles per dollar. It's much, much higher. Also, people don't have ways to get their savings, even if it's in dollars, out of Russia because the banking system is not working. And the looming default is up to 150 billion. This is comparable with the Argentina default, not as big as Greece, but comparable with Argentina, so second largest. And Russia has a bitter and unfortunate history of state defaults. In 1917, with the Bolshevik Revolution, they defaulted on the Tsarist Empire debt. And guess what? It took over 70 years till 1986 to repay the 1917 default.
Wow.
Putin said that the last payments on the Russian and Soviet debt, they paid off in 2017.
And Ariel, I'm actually looking at on the headline that had crossed as you and I are speaking. President Biden will travel to Europe next week to meet with EU and NATO leaders in Brussels. Do we have until next week? I mean, how much longer can this be prolonged? I guess the question that many folks are asking, what else can be done to stop the aggression in Russia? Or is that nuclear threat so real? And that's really what's holding, these countries back.
Well, not only President Biden is traveling, the heads of governments of 3 NATO countries, Slovenia, which is a tiny country, Czech Republic, and Poland are traveling to Kyiv. And I guess, one, they will try to impinge on Russia not to bomb Kyiv, not to storm. While they are there, a similar event happened when the Russians were approaching Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, Republic of Georgia, in 2008. And I remember we held a conference with the vice premier on the cell phone from the front in Georgia at the time. And these leaders, including, I think, Polish and others, being in Tbilisi, stopped the war then. I don't think they can stop the war now. And Biden has a challenge because the Europeans are very dependent on Russian natural gas, and there are no quick solutions. Germany, to my surprise, decided to import more coal, one of the most polluting sources of fuel, but they're still very cagey about nuclear, which is zero emissions, but nevertheless, they want coal, they want more natural gas from North Sea. They stopped exploration and production in the North Sea. Now they're going back. These are good news also for LNG, American LNG, and Qatari, Algerian, Nigerian, you name it. If you have LNG, you probably can sell it in Europe to replace the Russian gas. Russia is facing also a lot of problems with the airplanes because the civilian airplanes in Russia are Airbuses and Boeings. The parts will not go in 2 or 3 weeks. Some of these planes will stop flying. And Russia also is expropriating them. They're taking the planes and not necessarily giving compensation to the owners, just as with the default I mentioned before. They said they're going to give people rubles. And of course, they can print as many rubles as their printing presses can turn out. The value of that paper is going to be abysmal.
All right, Ariel, we appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.